When you hear the names Jay Garrick, Barry Allen, Wally West, and Bart Allen, you already know who they are, right? They're all speedsters. One of them is part of the Justice League. One of them is part of the Young Justice crew, or Titans, however you want to categorize them as. The older fellow is part of the Justice Society. These characters have all been staples when it comes to the Flash comics. But there are other names in the Flash comics that also exist. You have characters like Jesse Quick, Jess Chambers, and even Max Mercury. Now, there's probably more that I can't think of, but Max Mercury is a name that has been often heard when it comes to the talks of speedsters. I've heard this name many times, but in terms of my knowledge of this character, it's zero. I don't know anything about him. So, before I look into the figure, as I always do in these videos, well, since it's a character we don't know anything about, we must read the data profile card on the back and find out who the hell is Max Mercury. Is he a well-known character? If he is, please tell me in the comments below, because if you have more knowledge of this character than I do, inform me, because I would like to know more about this guy. As for the artwork they chose to use, I think the figure kind of resembles a lot of it in many areas. Now, this figure could have benefited from some shading, maybe, so then it doesn't look all too just plain paint. So we'll get to that in the aesthetics. As for who he is, his real name, well, he doesn't have a real name, unfortunately. Oh, and the figure's gonna fall. Isn't this funny? The last video, same thing happened. They don't stand. Okay, that's fine. All right, he doesn't have a real name, so there's that. Max Mercury was imbued with the power of the Speed Force as a member of the U.S. Cavalry in the 19th century. Following a massacre of Native Americans, a dying shaman enchanted Max, granting him unlimited super speed and the ability to shift his molecules and pass through solid objects. Known over the years as Quicksilver, Windrunner, Whip, Whirlwind, and the Zen Master of Speed, Max tried to penetrate the mysteries of the Speed Force many times. Each time he found himself skipping forward in time, with the result that he now finds himself in the 21st century. He has a lot of names, but Whip Whirlwind and the Zen Master of Speed? That's crazy. And then the fact that he was also called Quicksilver? Hey, you know, it is true, right? Marvel and DC sometimes have characters that share the same superhero name, so it's not surprising. I mean, Marvel has an Enchantress. DC also has an Enchantress, so there's that. Yeah, so he's gone through many names, but I think Max Mercury is more easier to remember. Whip Whirlwind. I don't know if you want to call him that. Okay, let's take a look at the figure now. So, I think aesthetically, he's a pretty cool figure in terms of capturing what he looks like in the comics. But there are flaws. He's not perfect. So, for example, the paint. These figures are costing more now. These are no longer $20 figures. This is a $25 figure, right? And in the last video, I talked about how that Nightfall Catwoman mold, it is feeling like it's going to become the standard mold that they will use for female characters going forward that are skinny. I could be wrong, but that's what it feels like, because there's already been a couple figures we have gotten in this line that has reused that mold. If it's not Catwoman, it's a few other characters. This particular body mold is not new. This mold has been introduced in the Blue Beetle and Booster Gold 2-pack. And since then, there have been a good handful of figures of other characters that have reused this particular body buck. So, this has now become the, I guess, standard figure mold for, I guess, the male characters who are muscular but not like too skinny or too bulky. It's just right in between. And is it a good thing to reuse body molds? I think it really depends on the figure. Right? Again, there are times where it's good and there are times where it's bad. For this one, I guess it works, but when you put it right next to the other characters that are reusing this mold too, it doesn't break up any differences and it just feels like everybody looks the same. And I think that's why reuse molds sometimes is not always a good decision when it comes to how you sculpt a figure. And one of the things I've said in my older videos that came out last month pertaining to some of those other figures is the fact that Mcfarlane has always been known for good sculpts. And prior to this year and last year, or not even, no, just this year alone, I would say that a lot of the figures were newly sculpted. They had sculpts that were never used before, and it was like the first time we seen them. And then now I think we're entering into that era where it does feel like Marvel Legends, where movie figures might get a bigger budget, so new sculpts will probably happen for them. Page punchers will still probably continue that trend of having new sculpts every year. But then when it comes to figures that are within the regular DC Multiverse line or even the collector's line, there will be some reuse happening more often than none. And I think this is where things are going to be now. So it's just how things are, unfortunately. And would he have benefited from a different sculpt? I don't know. I don't sculpt action figures, but maybe if someone who sculpted action figures, they would probably think that he would benefit from his own mold, right? But to me, this is another time where maybe this mold works and it's fine to reuse. But if you have a different opinion, let me know. And yeah, so let's get into the figure. So he does have a little bit of chest hair going on there, which is kind of crazy. I don't know if I've had any other figures with... Oh, right. The Bane. He does have hair painted on his his arms. Yeah, there's that. And then here's one thing that I want to show. Look at that seam line on the neck. That is so visible. Like, I don't know if that's a QC problem. Maybe my copy just has it, or all copies have it. And on top of QC, there's a QC right up here too. It's like skin tone painted on the red. It's not supposed to be like that. So yeah, my copy has like tiny little QC that I didn't notice until after I opened it, and it's fine. It's not the end of the world, right? But this is one of those moments where I felt like his neck could have benefited from a little bit more sculpting if they really wanted to do that. Because in the photo, he looks like he's like in his 50s, like early 50s, late 40s, but the figure makes it look like he's like in his 20s. So it's like a more youthful Max Mercury. So yeah. As for accessories, now these accessories have changed over the years, and this is something else that I want to talk about. So the original Rebirth Flash figure introduced this thing called the peg-on accessories, where you peg the lightnings on these portholes on the figures, right? They stopped doing that over time. I don't remember which figures introduced the whole, these kind of lightning accessories where you have to, I guess, find a way to put them on the figure, right? So he comes with two longer ones, and then he comes with two that are meant for the maybe the arms, depending on how you use them. But like, these are just like clip-on accessories, so you just clip them onto his arm and leg so you can simulate that he's running super fast. They're okay. They're not the best because they're very flimsy, so they do fall off if you don't like put the accessory on properly. I still like that original Rebirth Flash figure more, because at least when you peg them onto the hole, they stay there and you can still simulate the running thing better. So, but yeah, these are the only accessories he comes with. And of course he comes with the basic DC stand and that card. So there's nothing else going on. He doesn't have any interchangeable hands, which I think sucks, because you want to get him into a running pose. Well, most of them tend to have the running hands, right? Like the open hand where they look like they're running. He doesn't have that. So if you're trying to do like a running pose photo, it's just going to be really funny. And again, we have the trigger finger hand. I don't think this guy uses a gun, all right? So, like, Mcfarlane and their choices with the hands. He could probably grip something with that, but yeah. And one fist hand. Come on. Like, it's a crime to just include one fist hand. If you're going to include one fist hand, give the figure another fist hand at least, right? So, okay. Articulation-wise, if since this is probably the first video that I've shown this body mold, it's not that good in some areas. For example, the leg can't kick out that much, right? Because even though this is a soft piece, it hinders it from really kicking out too much. And I mean, for the splits though, he can definitely split his legs out pretty far. I mean, it's not a bad thing. That's pretty good. And then he can go back a little bit, right? So there is movement there, and I think that's fine. As for his waist, yeah, it could rotate pretty good. Like, sometimes these figures can be stiff. Now, for mine, it's not too stiff and not too loose. So the range of motion on this guy's pretty good. Now, can he ab crunch? No, not really. Can he he can, but you see that gap right there. So again, even though this was a brand new mold that was introduced with 2 figures, it's still crazy how they still don't carve out enough room where he can like crunch forward, because it would make more sense if he can. And he does have the swivel up here, like usual. Every DC Multiverse figure had this. I forgot to show this with Fire's articulation. He also has a pretty good double joint, I think, so that's fine. And then his hands swivel, and then there's sculpted articulation. So he has the usual articulation, and then of course his legs can double articulate, right? So there's double joint. It's not a good double joint. It looks really ugly, right? You can see the bottom half and the top half. And then of course he also has that rock side to side, toe articulation, the standard articulation you will always see on most DC Multiverse figures, as usual. And then of course his head, let's zoom in on the head articulation. I believe you can look up pretty good, you can look down, you can tilt side to side, you can look side to side like that. So pretty good in terms of like head movement as usual, right? Compared to Marvel Legends, where they still don't have that. It's crazy how these figures at least can move their head a little bit better, but Marvel Legends still uses that weird peg system that I think is just awful. So now, in putting these effects on him, I will try to show an example of how you do this. I don't even know if I'm doing it right. So I guess if you want to have it on his legs, technically it goes over him like this. I don't know, like you have to play around with them. That's all I'll say. If you want to do some sort of running pose with this figure, you're gonna have to just think of how to use these pieces in the best way possible, because I don't know how you would use it, because it'll be different from how I use it. There's no instructions on how you put these on, so it's really up for interpretation. Like for me, when I see these pieces, I always think that this is for the arm, right? So if I put this, let's just see if this will go. Oh, nope, not really. Yeah, I always think those pieces go on arm. So But you can mix and match them. You can have like maybe one long one on the arm and then or not long one, a short one, and then the long one on the other arm. So you can like kind of swap between, but they're okay. They work when they want to, but they can be annoying sometimes to put on. So that's something I will say. And yeah, that's basically it when it comes to Max Mercury. And there's really nothing else going on with this figure besides the fact that he's a speedster. So if you know who this guy is, comment down below. If you like this video, please give a like. If you want to subscribe to my channel, you can also do that too if you like the way I do reviews. But in the end, I do this for fun. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this video and have a happy Friday as usual. So take care, and I will see you in the next video.